The first thing Marcus Chen felt was pain. It started in his head and moved down through his whole body like fire. He opened his eyes and saw smoke. Thick black smoke that burned his lungs and made his eyes water. He was hanging upside down, held in place by his safety straps. The world was wrong. Everything was wrong. He remembered now. The ship, the asteroids, the alarms screaming as the meridian broke apart around them. He remembered Captain Voss shouting orders. He remembered the navigator, a young woman named Sarah, being thrown across the bridge when the hull cracked open. He remembered the terrible sound of metal tearing like paper. Marcus reached up, with shaking hands, and pressed the release on his straps. He fell hard onto what used to be the ceiling. Glass cut into his palms. He lay there for a moment, breathing, trying to think through the fog in his brain. He had to move. The smoke was getting thicker. Something was burning nearby, and if he stayed here, he would die. Marcus crawled through the wreckage of the survey vessel. He passed bodies. He did not stop to check if they were alive. He could see they were not. The human body was not meant to bend in those directions. He pushed the thought away and kept moving. The emergency exit was jammed. Marcus kicked it once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th kick, it flew open, and he tumbled out onto soft ground covered in strange plants that glowed with pale blue light. He lay on his back, staring up at an alien sky. 2 moons hung overhead, one large and orange, one small and white. The air was thick and wet and smelled like metal and rotting flowers. He could breathe it, but each breath felt heavy in his chest. Marcus sat up slowly and looked around. The meridian had carved a long scar through the forest when it fell. Trees lay broken and burning on either side of the crash path. The ship itself was destroyed beyond any hope of repair. The front section, where the bridge had been, was completely gone. The middle section, where Marcus had been working in the science lab, was cracked open like an egg. Only the back section was somewhat intact, but flames were spreading through it quickly. He was alone. He was alone on an alien world, and everyone else was dead. Marcus allowed himself 10 seconds to feel the weight of this. He counted them in his head. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then he pushed the grief down deep inside himself and stood up. He knew this planet. He had studied the files during the journey here. Kethro 7, a death world. The Galactic Union had sent probes here for decades, and every single one had been destroyed within hours. The planet was filled with predators that had evolved to kill anything that moved. The Union had classified it as permanently uninhabitable. No colony, no research station, no contact allowed. And now Marcus was standing on its surface with nothing but the clothes on his back. He walked back toward the burning ship. The heat was intense, but he forced himself to get close. He needed supplies. He needed anything he could find. The survival kit was in the back section. If he could reach it before the flames did, he might have a chance. Marcus wrapped his jacket around his face and climbed through a hole in the hull. The smoke was so thick he could barely see. He moved by memory, counting steps, turning left where he knew the storage lockers should be. His hand found the emergency kit. He grabbed it and ran. He made it out just as something inside the ship exploded. The force threw him forward onto the ground. He rolled, clutching the kit to his chest, and came up on his knees facing the ship. The back section was now fully engulfed in flames. There would be no going back. Marcus opened the kit with shaking hands. Inside, he found a multi-tool, a flare gun with 4 flares, water purification tablets, a small medical pack, emergency rations for 3 days, and a thermal blanket. It was not much. It was almost nothing, but it was something. The sun was setting. Marcus could see it through the trees, a red giant sinking below the horizon. The blue glow of the plants was getting brighter as the natural light faded. And in the growing darkness, he could hear things moving. Something rustled in the undergrowth to his left. Something clicked and chittered in the trees above him. Something large and heavy walked through the forest behind him. Each footstep shaking the ground slightly. Marcus stood very still. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He was prey. He knew it. Everything on this planet knew it. He was soft and slow and weak, and he was surrounded by things that were made to kill. The burning ship crackled and popped. A section of hull collapsed inward, sending up a shower of sparks. And Marcus noticed something. The sounds around him had stopped. The clicking, the rustling, the heavy footsteps. All gone. He looked at the fire. Then he looked at the darkness beyond. They were afraid of the fire. The creatures of Kethros 7, for all their deadly evolution, were afraid of fire. Of course they were. Fire was rare on this wet, humid world. Fire was strange and unknown and dangerous. Fire was something they did not understand. But Marcus understood fire. His ancestors had mastered it 100,000 years ago. It was in his blood, in his bones, in the deepest parts of his human brain. Fire was his dot. He moved quickly now, purpose driving away the fear. He gathered fallen branches and dry leaves. He pulled pieces of wreckage from the crash site, anything that would burn. He used the flames from the ship to light smaller fires in a ring around a clear space near the wreckage. By the time full darkness fell, Marcus had built a perimeter. It was rough and desperate and would not last long, but it was something. He sat in the center of his ring of fire and watched the shadows beyond. Eyes watched him back. Dozens of eyes, hundreds of eyes, glowing in the firelight. They circled his camp like sharks around a wounded swimmer. They were waiting. They were patient. They knew that fires died eventually, but Marcus was patient too. He had 72 hours until the distress beacon reached the nearest relay station. 72 hours until help could possibly arrive. He just had to survive until then. He looked at the eyes in the darkness. He looked at the flames dancing around him. He looked at his small pile of supplies and the burning wreckage of everything he had known. 72 hours. He had survived worse odds before. Maybe not much worse. But worse. Marcus Chun settled in for the longest night of his life, and he made a silent promise to himself. He would not die on this planet. He would not become food for alien monsters. He was human, and humans did not give up. They never had. They never would. The creatures watched and waited. The human watched and waited right back. The first attack came 2 hours after sunset. Marcus heard them before he saw them. A clicking sound like bones rattling together, coming from every direction at once. Then they burst from the undergrowth, and Marcus saw what he was dealing with. They were insects. Or something like insects. Each one was the size of a large dog, with 6 legs covered in sharp spines and mandibles that could cut through metal. Their bodies were black and shiny, and their eyes glowed red in the firelight. There were at least 20 of them, maybe more. Marcus grabbed a burning branch from the nearest fire and held it in front of him like a sword. The creatures stopped at the edge of the light. They clicked and chittered at each other, communicating in some way he could not understand. One of them, larger than the others, stepped forward. It tested the air with its antennae, then took another step. Marcus swung the burning branch. The fire passed close to the creature's face, and it jumped back with a high-pitched scream. The others scattered, retreating into the darkness. But they did not leave. Marcus could still see their eyes, still hear their clicking. He called them skitters in his mind. It seemed to fit. For the next hour, the skitters tested his defenses. They would rush forward, 1 or 2 at a time, then retreat when Marcus drove them back with fire. They were learning. Each attack came a little closer. Each retreat took a little longer. They were figuring out how far the flames could reach. They were measuring him. Marcus was getting tired. His arms ached from swinging the branch. His eyes burned from the smoke. He could not keep this up forever. He needed a better plan. He looked at the wreckage of the ship. There were still fuel cells in there, emergency reserves that had not exploded yet. If he could reach them, he could keep the fires burning much longer. But that would mean leaving his safe circle. That would mean walking into the darkness where the skitters waited. He did not have a choice. Marcus grabbed 2 burning branches, one in each hand, and ran. The skitters screamed and scattered as he burst through their line. He reached the ship and climbed inside, waving the fire around him like a shield. His hands found the fuel cell compartment. He pulled out 2 cells, heavy metal cylinders filled with liquid that burned hot and long. The skitters were recovering. They were between him and his camp now, clicking and hissing, building their courage. Marcus held up one of the branches and threw it at the largest group. They scattered. He ran. He made it back to his circle with seconds to spare. The skitters snapped at his heels, but they would not cross the fire line. Marcus collapsed in the center of his camp, breathing hard, clutching the fuel cells to his chest. He had won. For now, Marcus cracked open the first fuel cell and poured its contents along his fire line. The flames jumped higher, burning brighter and hotter than before. The skitters retreated further into the darkness. But Marcus knew they would be back. And he had just used half of his fuel. The second attack came from something different. Marcus felt it before he saw it. A change in the air, a drop in temperature. Something cold was moving toward him, something that did not care about fire that it came out of the ground. The creature was long and thin, like a snake but with no scales. Its skin was pale and wet, and it had no eyes that Marcus could see. But it had a mouth, a terrible mouth filled with teeth that curved backward like hooks. It moved by flowing across the ground, boneless and silent. Marcus stumbled backward as the thing rose up in front of him. It swayed back and forth, tasting the air with a forked tongue. Then it lunged. He threw himself to the side. The creature's teeth snapped closed where his head had been a moment before. Marcus rolled and came up with his multi-tool in his hand. The blade extended. The creature turned toward him, drawn by his movement. No, not his movement. His heat. It was hunting by body heat. Marcus looked at the fires around him. That was why it had come. The flames were like a beacon, calling every heat-hunting predator for miles around. He was trying to stay safe, and instead he was advertising his location to the most dangerous things on the planet. He needed to hide his heat signature. But how? His eyes fell on a piece of the ship's hull, a flat panel of reflective metal that had been thrown clear of the crash. It was designed to deflect solar radiation. Maybe it could deflect something else too. Marcus grabbed the panel and held it in front of him like a shield. The creature lunged again. This time, its teeth scraped across the metal surface. It recoiled, confused. Its tongue flicked out, searching for the heat source that had suddenly disappeared. Marcus backed away slowly, keeping the panel between them. He gathered more panels from the wreckage, always moving slowly, always keeping himself shielded. He arranged them in a rough barrier around the warmest part of his camp, angling them to scatter his heat signature in multiple directions. The snake thing circled his camp for another hour, searching for the prey it had lost. Eventually, it gave up and slithered away into the darkness. Marcus called it a stalker. Dawn came slowly. The red sun rose above the trees, turning the sky pink and gold. Marcus had not slept. He did not dare to sleep. But he was alive. He looked at the ground around his camp. It was marked with tracks and claw marks. The dirt was torn up in dozens of places where creatures had tried to dig under his fire line. There were scorch marks where things had tried to jump through the flames. And in one spot, near the back of his perimeter, there was a pool of smoking liquid where something had tried to dissolve through the metal barricade he had built from ship debris. Something with acid. Marcus sat down heavily and put his head in his hands. This was only the first night. He had 2 more nights to survive, maybe 3. And the creatures of this planet were already adapting to his defenses. But so was he. He looked at the skitter corpse near his camp, the one that had been too slow to retreat from his thrown torch. He looked at the tracks in the dirt, each one telling a story about how the creature that made it moved and hunted. He looked at the acid burns and the claw marks and the dig sites thought he was learning. Every attack taught him something new. Every creature that tried to kill him showed him another weakness he could exploit. The planet was testing him, and he was taking notes. In the tree line, something massive shifted its weight. Marcus had seen it moving in the shadows all night, circling his camp at a distance. It was bigger than anything else, bigger than the skitters or the stalkers, or whatever had tried to melt through his walls. It had not attacked yet. It was just watching. Marcus stared at the shadow where it hid. The shadow seemed to stare back. He did not know what it was yet, but he would find out. He would learn its patterns and its weaknesses, just like he was learning everything else. Because that was what humans did. They learned. They adapted. They survived. Marcus stood up and began to reinforce his camp. The first night was over. He had 48 hours left. He got to work. By midday, Marcus had stopped thinking like prey. He had started thinking like a scientist. He stood over the dead skitter, the one from last night, and studied it carefully. The creature was even more terrifying up close. Its mandibles were sharp enough to cut through bone. Its legs were covered with barbs that could tear flesh. Its exoskeleton was hard as stone, but it had weaknesses. Marcus used his multi-tool to cut the creature open. Inside, he found organs he did not recognize, tubes filled with strange fluids, and 2 small sacs near the head that smelled terrible. He squeezed one of the sacs, and a yellow liquid oozed out. The smell got worse. Much worse. He remembered something from his biology training. Many pack hunters use pheromones to communicate. Fear pheromones. Attack pheromones. Stay away pheromones. If these sacs produced fear pheromones, he might be able to use them. Marcus collected the yellow liquid in an empty container from his survival kit. Then he walked to the edge of his camp and spread the liquid on the ground in a wide circle. That night, no skitters came near his fire. They circled at a distance, clicking and calling, but they would not cross the line he had drawn. The fear pheromones told them that something terrible had happened here. Something had killed one of their own. Something dangerous. Marcus smiled for the first time since the crash. He spent the second day exploring the area around his camp, always staying within sight of his fires, always watching for danger. He found plants that produced toxic sap. He found rocks that sparked when struck together. He found insects that glowed so bright they could light up the darkness. He also found fresh kills. Large animals, torn apart and half-eaten, scattered throughout the forest within a few hundred meters of his camp. Something was hunting in this area. Something big. The shadow in the tree line. The thing that had watched him all through the first night. Marcus followed the kills back to their source. He was careful, moving slowly, using the reflective panels to hide his heat signature. He found a place where the undergrowth had been crushed flat, where deep claw marks scarred the trees. A territory marker. A territory marker. The shadow creature lived here, and it did not like intruders. But it had not killed Marcus. It had watched him all night, and it had not attacked. Why? Marcus thought about it for a long time. Then he understood. His camp was inside the creature's territory. To the shadow creature, Marcus was not an intruder. He was part of the territory now, and the shadow creature was keeping other predators away, not to protect Marcus, but to protect its own hunting ground. He could use this. That evening, Marcus dragged one of his smaller kills to the edge of the territory and left it there. An offering, a payment for protection. The shadow creature found it within the hour. Marcus watched from his camp as the massive shape emerged from the trees. It was at least 4 meters tall, covered in thick scales the color of dried blood. Its head was broad and flat, with eyes that glowed yellow in the fading light. It looked at the offering. Then it looked at Marcus for a long moment. They stared at each other. Then the shadow creature bent down and ate the kill. When it was done, it retreated into the forest. It did not attack. Marcus called it the warden. It was not a friend. It was not a pet. But it was useful. He kept working. He built his camp higher, constructing a platform in the trees using wreckage from the ship. Nothing could reach him there except flying things, and the flying things were small and easily scared by noise. He made noisemakers from scrap metal, wind chimes that clinked and clanged when the breeze blew. The sounds were similar to the warning calls he had heard larger predators make. The flying things stayed away. He dug a moat around his camp and filled it with liquid from the toxic plants he had found. Anything that tried to cross would burn. He created a smoke system using the glowing insects, whose light came from a chemical reaction to produce thick, breathable fumes. The fumes killed the spores in the air, making his camp the only place for miles where a human could breathe easily. By the end of the second day, Marcus had transformed his desperate shelter into a fortress. He had fire lines and fear pheromones and toxic moats. He had warning systems and clean air and a territorial predator that kept the worst dangers away. He had turned the planet's own weapons against itself. He looked at his work with something like pride. He was still exhausted. He was still injured. He was still alone on a death world with enemies everywhere. But he was not helpless anymore. That night, he slept for 4 hours, the longest he had slept since the crash. His defenses held. The skidders stayed away. The stalkers could not find him. The warden patrolled the perimeter, keeping other apex predators out of its territory. When Marcus woke, he found something unexpected outside his camp. A creature he had not seen before, small and covered in soft fur, lying dead at the base of his tree. It had been killed by something else, not by his defenses. The warden had left it there. An offering, a gift, a recognition of their strange alliance. Marcus laughed. It was a rough sound, broken and tired, but it was still a laugh. He had been stranded on a planet designed to kill him, and he had somehow convinced its most dangerous predator that they were partners. Humans were social animals. They formed groups, built relationships, created alliances. They had done it since the beginning of their species, long before they had language or tools or fire. It was instinct. And apparently, it worked on alien planets too. He took the offering and ate it. It tasted terrible, but protein was protein. He needed his strength for what was coming, because Marcus could feel something changing in the forest around him. The creatures were behaving differently now. The attacks had stopped, yes, but so had the normal sounds of the jungle. The clicking and chittering, the calls and screams of a living ecosystem. All quiet now. All watching. They knew something was wrong. They knew that a strange creature had come to their world and broken the rules. And they were not happy about it. Marcus looked at the silent forest, at the eyes he could feel watching him from the shadows. He checked his defenses one more time. He counted his remaining resources. He prepared for what was coming. The planet was planning something. He could feel it in his bones. He had 48 hours when he started. Now he had 24. One more day. One more night. He would make it count. It started at sunset, though Marcus heard them coming before he saw them. Not the clicking of skitters or the silent slither of stalkers. This was different. This was hundreds of feet moving through the forest at once. This was every predator on Kethros 7 heading in the same direction, heading toward him. He climbed to the top of his platform and looked out over the forest. What he saw made his blood run cold. They came from every direction. Skitters and stalkers moving side by side, natural enemies now hunting together. Flying things filled the sky in thick clouds. Burrowing things pushed up through the soil, leaving trails of broken earth behind them. And behind them all, walking slowly, came creatures Marcus had never seen before. Massive things with armor like tanks. Fast things with legs like blades. Things that dripped poison and things that glowed with strange light. The entire ecosystem of Kethros 7 was coming to kill him. Marcus understood now. The planet was not just a collection of predators. It was a system, a network. The creatures shared information through chemicals in the soil, passed knowledge from one generation to the next. And that network had decided that Marcus was a threat. Not prey anymore. A disease. Something that had to be destroyed before it spread. Even the warden was coming. Marcus could see it in the tree line, its yellow eyes burning with fury. The alliance was over. The territorial instincts that had protected Marcus were overridden now by something deeper. The planet itself was calling, and every creature had to answer. Marcus climbed down from his platform. Fear was there, yes, but under the fear was something else. Something cold and hard and very old. Humans had faced extinction before. They had faced ice ages and supervolcanoes and predators bigger than houses. They had survived because they refused to give up. Because when everything else failed, they fought. Marcus was going to fight. He checked his defenses one last time. The fire line was strong. The toxic moat was full. The fear pheromones were spread thick around the perimeter. The noisemakers clattered in the wind. It was not enough. He knew it was not enough, but it would have to do. The first wave hit at full dark. Skitters poured across the fire line, ignoring the flames, ignoring the burns. They were programmed to attack, and nothing would stop them. Marcus met them with a burning branch in one hand and a makeshift spear in the other. He stabbed and slashed and kicked, driving them back one by one. Bodies piled up around him. The second wave came from below. Burrowing things erupted from the ground inside his perimeter, breaking through the roots of his platform tree. Marcus jumped clear as the tree shook and groaned. He landed hard and rolled, coming up in time to see a burrower's jaws snap closed where his leg had been. He drove his spear through its head and used its body as a shield against the next one. The third wave came from above. Flying things descended in a screaming cloud, claws and beaks tearing at his skin. Marcus grabbed his flare gun and fired into the swarm. The flare exploded in a burst of red light. The flying things scattered, burning and falling from the sky. One flare left. He could not waste it, but they kept coming. For every creature he killed, 2 more took its place. His fire line was failing. His toxic moat was empty, used up on the burrowers. His arms were heavy with exhaustion, and his body was covered in cuts and bites and burns. Then the warden attacked God. It came through the perimeter like a living tank, crushing everything in its path. Fire did not slow it. Poison did not hurt it. It was 4 meters of rage and muscle and teeth, and it was coming straight for Marcus. He ran. There was nothing else to do. He ran through his own camp, jumping over fires and dodging creatures. The warden followed, destroying everything in its path. The platform collapsed. The defenses fell. Everything Marcus had built was torn apart in seconds. He reached the wreckage of the Meridian. His back was against the broken hull. There was nowhere else to go. The warden stopped in front of him. It was bleeding from a dozen wounds, cut by its own allies in its rush to reach the human. Its eyes burned with something that might have been hatred, or respect, or both. Marcus held up his last flare. His hand was shaking. His vision was blurring from blood loss and exhaustion. He had nothing left. Nothing but one tiny light against the darkness. The warden opened its jaws. Marcus fired. The flare went straight into the creature's mouth and exploded. The warden screamed, a sound so loud it shook the ground. It stumbled backward, clawing at its face, smoke pouring from between its teeth. It crashed into the creatures behind it, crushing skitters and stalkers under its massive body. The attack broke apart as every creature scrambled to escape the thrashing giant. Marcus did not wait. He grabbed a burning piece of wreckage and charged into the chaos. He used the confusion to kill anything that came near him. He moved through the battle like a ghost, striking and disappearing, using the creature's own panic against them. It was not skill. It was not strategy. It was survival instinct. Millions of years of evolution compressed into a single desperate hour. By dawn, it was over. Marcus stood in the center of what used to be his camp. The ground was covered with dead and dying creatures. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of blood. He was bleeding from more wounds than he could count. His left arm hung useless at his side. One eye was swollen shut. His clothes were torn to rags. But he was standing at the edge of the battlefield. Survivors watched. Skitters huddled together, clicking softly. Stalkers coiled around each other for warmth. The flying things perched in the trees, silent for once. The burrowers had retreated underground. The warden lay on its side, still breathing. The flare had not killed it, but it had burned away something inside. The rage was gone from its eyes. Something else had taken its place. Something like fear. Marcus looked at them. They looked back. He was not prey anymore. He was not a disease to be destroyed. He was something else now. Something they had never seen before. Something that would not break, would not run, would not die. He was human. Marcus sat down among the bodies of his enemies and waited for the sun to rise. He had one more day to survive. Just one more day. He could do that. He had already done the impossible. What was one more day? The creatures watched and did not attack. They had learned their lesson. The human had won. The rescue shuttle descended through the clouds of Kethro 7, and its pilot could not believe what she was seeing. Cassara had been flying rescue missions for the Galactic Union for 15 years. She had seen death worlds before. She had recovered bodies from planets that made this one look friendly. She knew what to expect when she received the distress signal from the Meridian. She expected to find wreckage. She expected to find corpses. She did not expect to find a human sitting on top of a fortress, surrounded by the largest collection of dead predators she had ever seen. Calmly waving at her ship, she landed the shuttle at the edge of the clearing, keeping the engines running. Her co-pilot, a four-armed Kreth named Volan, stared at the scene with all three of his eyes wide open. "That is not possible," Volan said. "The database says nothing survives on Kethro 7 for more than 6 hours. He has been here for 3 days." "I can see that," Cassara said quietly. "I can also see that he's walking toward us." The human was a mess. His arm was wrapped in strips of cloth torn from his own clothes. His face was covered in cuts and bruises. He limped badly, and every step seemed to cause him pain. But he was moving steadily, and his eyes were alert. Behind him, something massive shifted in the tree line. Cassara's hand went to her weapon, but the human held up his good hand in a calming gesture. He turned and made a sound, a low rumble from deep in his throat. The massive shape settled back into the shadows. "What in the name of the founders?" Volan whispered. The human reached the shuttle and stopped. He looked at Kesara with eyes that had seen too much. "Dr. Marcus Chen," he said. "Survey Vessel Meridian. I'm the only survivor." Kesara could not find words. She had prepared herself for many things on this mission. She had not prepared herself for a human who had apparently tamed a death world. "Dr. Chun," she finally managed. "How did you?" The database said Kethra 7 was survivable, Marcus said. He climbed into the shuttle and sat down heavily on the nearest seat. "With some modifications." Volan was still staring out the window. "There are creatures out there," he said. "They're watching the ship. They're not attacking." "They won't," Marcus said. He closed his eyes and let his head fall back against the seat. "We have an understanding now." Kesara looked at the human, then at the battlefield outside, then back at the human. In her 15 years of rescue work, she had never seen anything like this. Humans were soft creatures, fragile. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. They came from a small planet on the edge of the galaxy, and most species considered them unremarkable. But this human had survived 3 days on a planet that killed everything. He had fought an army of predators and won. And now those same predators were watching him leave with something that looked almost like respect. "What are you?" Kesara asked. She did not mean to say it out loud. The words just came. Marcus opened his eyes. For a moment, he looked at her with an expression she could not read. Then he smiled, a tired smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Human," he said. "We're persistence predators. We come from a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, plagues, asteroid impacts. Our planet threw everything it had at us, and we just kept getting back up." He paused, and his smile grew a little wider. "This planet's good. Don't get me wrong. But Earth was meaner." The shuttle lifted off. Below them, the creatures of Kethro 7 watched the strange metal bird rise into the sky. The warden, still wounded from the battle, lifted its great head and tracked the shuttle with its yellow eyes. It remembered the creature that had burned its throat. It remembered the fear it had felt for the first time in its long life. It would remember forever. In the shuttle, Marcus was already asleep. His body had finally given up the fight it had been waging for 3 days. He slept deeply and did not dream. Kesara flew in silence. Volan kept looking back at the human, as if expecting him to disappear or transform into something more dangerous. "I need to update my understanding of humans," Volan said quietly. "My species has always thought of them as soft." "So did mine," Kesara admitted. "I think perhaps we were wrong." The shuttle broke through the atmosphere and into the cold silence of space. Below, Kethra 7 continued to turn, its forest full of predators, its soil full of death. It would go on killing everything that landed on its surface. Almost everything. 6 months later, the Galactic Union updated its database entry for Kethro 7. The classification was changed from uninhabitable, no contact allowed, to restricted. Human assessment required. A footnote was added to the file, written by a xenobiologist who had reviewed the footage from Marcus Chun's suit camera. The footnote read, "Human colonization theoretically possible. Local fauna may require adjustment period. Recommend consultation with human experts before any future surveys." The amendment passed through the Galactic Senate without opposition. No one wanted to be the species that told humans they could not live somewhere. They had seen what happened when humans were told something was impossible. They adapted. They endured. They won. In a hospital on the Union Station Harmony, Marcus Chun woke from a long sleep. His wounds were healing. His body was recovering. The doctor said he would be back to full strength within a month. A reporter was waiting outside his room, eager to interview the human who had survived the unsurvivable. The story had spread across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know how he had done it. Everyone wanted to understand. Marcus agreed to the interview. He answered the reporter's questions patiently, describing the crash, the creatures, the battle. But when the reporter asked him what had kept him going, what had given him the strength to survive when everything said he should die, Marcus paused. He thought about the fire in the darkness. He thought about the eyes watching from the shadows. He thought about the moment when the entire planet had risen against him, and he had chosen to fight instead of surrender. Stubbornness, I guess, he finally said. Humans don't know when to quit. We never have. It's probably a flaw, honestly. But sometimes, when everything is trying to kill you, being too stubborn to die is the only thing that matters. The reporter published the story. It spread across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of Earth looked it up in their databases and read about its history. They learned about the ice ages and the plagues and the predators. They learned about the wars and the disasters and the near extinctions. And they understood, perhaps for the first time, why humans were so hard to kill. On Kethro 7, the warden healed from its wounds. It returned to its territory, to the place where the human had built his fortress. The fortress was gone now, taken apart by the Union survey team that had come to study it. But the marks remained. The scorch marks from the fires, the trenches from the moat, the claw marks from the siege. The warden stood in the center of the old camp and breathed in the lingering smell of smoke and blood. It remembered the creature that had come to its world. The soft, weak creature that had refused to be prey. It wondered if there were more of them out there. More stubborn, impossible creatures who fought when they should have died. It hoped not. One had been enough. But somewhere, far across the galaxy, humans were building new ships and planning new voyages. They were looking at maps of unexplored space and wondering what was out there. They were doing what they had always done since the first human looked up at the stars and dreamed of touching them. They were reaching for the impossible, and they had no intention of stopping.